Alright, number 3 in the Intelligence Good Psychology Fucktarded series. And a connected parallel, whatever, I think obvious parallel, is objective-subjective. The intelligence has the capacity to be objective. And we know how the psychology is fundamentally subjective. It contrives, builds through nature and conditioning, preferences and prejudices that have no rational basis strictly, and our intelligence is doing something exactly the opposite. It's doing the rational basis thing. It's saying what is the truth. The trick is that some part of the intelligence has to leak into the subjective psychology, in the sense that you have to have a subjective interest in the truth. It somehow has to mean something to you. Or in the ideals described by your intelligence, they can't be ideals that are abhorrent to your subjective psychology. Not overtly, not aggressively abhorrent, let's say. So if you're highly invested in some subjective perception of value, and your objective reference informs you that that is meaningless, that may be a disagreement that's not acceptable, and your psychology will eviscerate the integrity of your intelligence to maintain its devotion to its subjective addiction. So we can see people do this. You can sort of see the rationalizations for meat eating, kind of thing. I mean, they're, people, rationalizations are sort of the evidence of that effect, where, the subjective attachment is too strong, and people will compromise their intellectual integrity to find excuses to justify their subjective bigotries. So anyway, Fred did a video where he's still sort of ragging on this idea of fundamentalism, and so he's most of the, I'll display the ending of his video and end of Kondavad's video, because most of the video is just kind of, blah, and the ending is just weird and strange. So maybe we can make something out of the ending. So he's basically gone through this idea that these fundamentalists have this notion of a solid truth. He doesn't really explain the fact that it's just dogma, that it is just absolute crap. And then he explains too, though, further that, the person who doesn't have the dogma can't resort to, nature in the sense that it's not going to be a very persuasive argument to say, well, what does our nature has built into it values, because those values are rather prejudiced to this idea of survival and reproduction, and they're not values that have much else to do with fairness or deserve or justice. And they certainly, we can see the fact that our sensibilities are just covered in prejudices like cuteness and attractiveness and all kinds of shit like that. The prejudices are all over the place. So that's not going to work as a source of truth. And the other one he gave the example of was the resort to, sorry, I can't remember. If it comes to me, I'll let you know. But he just explained how it doesn't work as a source of a foundational value. It's just really irritating that I can't remember it. Oh, the subject, yeah, no. So in other videos he's pointed out that value is subjective, that all value is subjective, and that it's intersubjective agreement that decides what the truth is. So he's said that in other videos, but he was actually just pointing out how that doesn't really work, because then you make slavery okay, and you make killing all the Jews okay, you make a lot of crazy things okay, because everybody agrees to do it because it's to their convenience. So that doesn't work. This popularity crap, it just isn't the way to judge whether something's right or wrong. It has to have logical continuity. So anyway, so he's basically trying to make this argument, or build an evidence for this argument, that there isn't a foundational and fundamental way to construct value, to find its kernel and build on those kernels. And I'm going to argue that yes, there is. Alright, you want to go find the quanta of value, you can find it. And then you can build on top of it in terms of interactions and coalesctions of value. But it's there. And I would also argue that if you want to find objective, I mean, we could replace the word objective with some kind of statement like, what would the supercomputer say? What would the smartest thing that it could ever be made in the universe, the biggest brain in the universe, say? And so I'm going to argue that it is ascertainable value, truth, discovering what the supercomputer would say. We can know that, surprisingly. There's enough evidence already here for us to draw the same exact conclusion that the supercomputer is going to draw. Because the mechanism is crude and simple, and it's not complicated. And the kernel of value, I'm going to argue, I do argue, is in this sentient experience, and that's all there is. It doesn't matter what makes you happy, it's the fact that you are happy. It isn't what gives you suffering, it is the fact that you suffer. These are the only things that matter. That's the only thing that has any value. Art has no value, unless it's editorial and political. Nothing else has any intrinsic value. It's all just aesthetics. It's all just what the common or most people find pleasure deriving. But again, it's not what makes somebody happy. It's being happy. And being happy efficiently and preventing as much suffering as possible. Not complicated. Really isn't complicated. The supercomputer will say, wow, I'm even too smart to have to even work to do this one. I didn't even have to burn like, a millisecond of computational cycles to figure this out. Anyway, let's play some of this
the
stuff.
Evolution of empathy within social species. Then you're on the kind of shifting sand of kind of naturalism. It would be very.
Well, naturalism isn't really shifting sand. It's just that it's dumb. So yeah, asking the DNA is a really bad idea because the DNA molecule don't have no brain, and it's stupid.
Easy for someone to say, well, sorry, we can adopt the morals of crocodiles and who eat their young. Is that how it works? However you answer that, you're never going to get to the metaphysically eternal, fundamental principles that.
See, it says you. So, I mean, in this word metaphysical, what do you mean by it? I mean, I've seen all kinds of definitions. Why are people still using a word that there is no agreed upon definition of? Because I've seen definitions as varied from complete religious caca to something as simple as anything to do with something material. So what good is this word, metaphysical?
One would require, if you had to adopt a foundationalist fundamental principle, an epistemology built like it was a building, you'll never get there.
Well, it says you, and by what authority? I'd argue no authority. So like everything has fundamental principles. You're bringing up buildings. There's fundamental principles of architecture. You're talking about defeating gravity primarily. These are the basic mechanics of it, and all engineering is like that, and all math is like that. Simple formulas built into more complex formulas. The kernels of establishing values, like giving pi at least an ambiguous number.
But by taking part of that, even by acknowledging that the question makes sense, what is the foundation of your knowledge? What is the basis of your moral principles? What are the fundamental principles of your belief? Just by accepting the question, you've allowed the debate to be framed in terms of this foundationalist epistemology. This idea.
Yeah, so he's arguing for a vague, like I said, he doesn't really point it out, so I can't really say anything much about it, but he's arguing that somehow value just comes in from nowhere. It just floats in as an idea or something. It just slides in out of the, but it's not built out of any kernels. It's not built out of any fundamental principles like torture bad, or, feeling bad, bad, feeling good, good. No, there's no fundamental principle like that.
Yeah, that knowledge or morality is a kind of building that has to be built on firm foundations. And however sensible that might sound when people say it, that isn't really how knowledge works. Knowledge isn't a building.
Well, okay, so he's broadened the argument to say that not just knowledge of value, but knowledge of everything isn't a building. And it's, again, sort of is. There's primary colors. There's, there's a fundament to things. And when we put things in categories, we put them in these broad categories and then more specific categories. General categories, specific categories. So, sorry, no sale.
Most people who study the philosophy of knowledge, the philosophy of epistemology.
Alright, so these are, now we're just going to get reference to most people who study it say. So there's the authority. Most people who study it say. It's almost like saying to be serious says. Like, oh, I'm supposed to take that seriously, huh? I don't think so.
Know that that's a very kind of weak structure, very weak idea for what knowledge is. There's been countless hours of work spent on critiquing that model. So however much sense it seems to make intuitively.
Yeah, well, whatever. Again, so if I'm going to make a car, I don't make it from the ground up. I don't make it understanding fundamental principles. I don't build the frame of the car first or something like that. I just don't, I think, no, yeah, I do.
What's happening is your understanding of the situation is being manipulated for rhetorical effect by the framing of the debate in terms of this foundational epistemology.
Well, I don't think it's any obstacle. So, like, it's not like some religious dude can just show up and say, you can't come up with an idea of value, you can't give me an answer to the value question that doesn't fit into my narrow frame of some sort of groundwork up. He's still going to ask you to produce goods, some sort of rational evidence, and it just seems like you're evading that entirely. You don't give, and you have time here in your video, and you didn't give an answer to the question. What do you claim value's based on? Make it uppery? Jimmy the Cricket tells you. Jimmy Cricket comes to you in the middle of the night and sings Wishing on a Star and tells you what the truth is?
So whenever you're asked, if you are asked, what is the foundational principles on which your beliefs are based? What are the fundamental ideas of knowledge? What is the basis for your morality? You have to think, okay, this is a foundationalist epistemology I'm being presented with here. Do I really regard knowledge, morality, as a kind of building? Do I need certain principles which have to bear the load of everything I think and feel and know to be right and know to be wrong?
Yeah, do you have principles regarding fairness? Do you understand the basic balances of power? Compensation even. Like say you're having a fight with somebody who's got one arm, and that you might say, okay, you can tie my arm behind my back, or some other idea, like that would be a principle to kind of balance things. Scales would be a principle even, the visualization of it. It's a foundational idea or concept of balance. What else would be, but like I said, there's no answer here, so I don't know what value this has.
They need that. The answer is no, you don't. That's not how it works. There's better epistemologies, networked epistemologies.
Networked epistemologies. So that's all we're going to get out of this video. Networked epistemologies. Okay, what does that mean? My mommy says so? Oh, my best friend and me were talking about it and we agreed. So that's a network, and we'll tell you what value is based on our agreement. No, I don't think so.
Epistemology based in webs, and epistemology is based in all kinds of things. It's a very rich area of study.
Of crap. Rich in crap. It's a big juicy manure pile, I think.
If you're interested.
Well, you didn't leave a link to anything, so I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do with my interest. Right? There's no links here. Yeah, there's no links here. So where's your manure pile so I can go see if I can find anything in it?
But yeah, my advice would be not to let yourself get ambushed, not to let the debate be framed in terms of a way of knowing which you are, which is bogus. You know.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, so don't try to explain anything. Just pretend. Just be secretive. Just say I have a magic decoder ring. The Martians did it. Yeah. That worked for O.J. Simpson, right? Martians killed Nicole.
And not let the conversation be spun in that way. Anyway, thanks very much for your patience with all these fundamentalists.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a really really a letdown. If you're going to sit there and say, okay, there is no fundamentalism, but we in a special club of fractionalists have, whatever, integrated our super technology to find the truth. Or something like it. We don't call it that, though. Yeah, because we like to have non-truth-based values. Ooh, that doesn't sound good. Yeah, no thank you. No thank you. No thank you. No thank you.
And see you on the tubes.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Yeah, crap. So anyway, the twit from Uranus or something, I think left a comment down here about Jesus, so I thought that was funny. I don't know. I think he did, but I don't know where it is. But I ain't gonna worry about it, I guess. There's some sort of... I think Jesus would understand what I'm talking about. Whatever. Fucking asshole religious nuts. I don't know what they're doing around here. Anyway, so let's do Anticontavod. I think it was this video. Youngstering, yeah. Alright, so let's play the last... let's go from like 10:35.
This is the smartest thing that you can do under the circumstances is say that you did these things because you're a victim of something or other. Because that's how our justice system works.
Right, so he's claiming that this is a primary function of our justice system, which it isn't, that somehow people get to claim the Twinkie defense all over the place and get away with it, which doesn't happen too often. So this is whole kind of a bogus premise to his conversation where he's just talking about mitigating circumstances and whatever, and victim, making yourself a victim to get off the hook, which again doesn't happen that often. Most people who murder people are crazy. They're factually crazy. Yeah, we don't say they're crazy enough to get let off the hook, but they're crazy. I'm sorry. They're crazy. They can't get anything right. I mean, when a woman drives her kids into the fucking lake, she's crazy.
Now, the thing is, if you take guilt to its ultimate conclusion, and I think that it's been done here in the...
Yeah, well, anyway, so let's just remember, the word guilt means responsibility. Okay, you can't have guilt without awareness. So guilt is a top-down function. You have to have awareness of the problem before you can feel guilty about the problem. So you have to have some sort of knowledge of justice or something. Sometimes you're just not going to realize that something's wrong until somebody informs you that it's wrong. I mean, before Mothers Against Drunk Driving, people just didn't think about drunk driving. Even though they might know that drunks cause a lot of accidents, they just didn't think about it, about how grossly irresponsible and obnoxious it is. There's even movies from like the 40s and 50s, where people are routinely driving drunk, and it's almost funny. And now we know that that's really not funny.
Course of this discussion. We're all victims. We're all victims of existence itself.
So again, he's just making some kind of argument here that somehow the perpetrators and the victims are all equal. They're all the same. We're all the same. All the results are the same. And I can't make any sense out of that whatsoever. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. We know that the child and the child molester are not in the same category. The child is an innocent thing of great potential that's getting soiled and ruined by the evil perpetrator who's selfishly satisfying his desires. They are not equals, they are not the same. One's a grotesque taker. I mean, it's, you know, this is just silly to be putting the rape victim in the same category with the rapist. It's idiotic. They don't belong in the same categories. You crazy fuck.
We're all off the hook because, again, I didn't ask to be here.
Well, that's not the point, right? The point is there's the driver's seat, okay? And as soon as you step into the driver's seat, as soon as you do something that impacts somebody else, you have to take responsibility. All right? The fact that you didn't ask to be here doesn't mean you have a right to run people over. Doesn't mean you have a right to pick their pockets. None of this stuff is now your right. Okay? Because there's no necessity for you to do any of that shit. There's no necessity. So you can't make some argument that now I have carte blanche because I didn't ask to be here. So now I can behave like a complete asshole. There's no logic in that. There's no rationality in that. I mean, it certainly doesn't have anything to do with even Jeffersonian principles of where rights begin and where rights end. It doesn't even come close to even meeting that simple ethic.
I didn't ask for anyone to create me. I didn't ask to be around. Nobody asked me if I wanted to be pulled out of existence into the...
That's not the point. I mean, the point is are you capable of being aware that when you take from somebody in a way that you wouldn't want to be taken from, so if you pick their pocket and then whine that somebody picks your pocket, that's called hypocrisy, and you can't do that. So if you're going to violate and torture somebody, then you have to be willing to be tortured by somebody else. That kind of bullshit. If you can violate their will, if you can impose upon them, then they can impose upon you, and you have no right to complain. So that's where the argument comes from, and that's where innocent versus guilty comes from. All right? If you're a taker, you can't complain because somebody's going to take from you.
This dreadful place. So I'm a victim. I'm off the hook. See, that's the thing about guilt-based ethics.
Well, I'm sorry. That's the thing about completely irrational, mushy arguments that are vacuous and nonsensical. And just because you present them like they're authoritative, it's complete and absolute crap. There is no get off the hook because I didn't give birth to myself. It doesn't change the fact that you're still responsible for what you do while you're here. And while you're walking and talking. And if you're going to complain you're too stupid or too ignorant to do the right thing, fine. But you're not complaining that you're too stupid and too ignorant. You're complaining that you don't want to do the right thing. And that's a big fucking difference, buddy.
You can always mitigate it. You can mitigate everything. Because ultimately, we're all victims. And it just becomes a scramble over who is the bigger victim.
Well, who believes that, right? Do any of you really believe that? Is there anybody who really believes that? Does that makes any sense? That everybody's in the same category and everybody's doing the same quality of job at their life, and everybody has the same amount of intellectual integrity, and everybody has the same amount of has the same work ethic? I mean, this is just absolute nonsense.
It also has the nasty net effect of glossing over the fact that we're all perpetrators. Because it assumes that there is a point, again, when I'm standing in that sort of model that I said, where I'm standing in front of two doors, one says damned if you do, the other one says damned if...
Yeah, well, we've already taken care of that, so I don't know. Again, just show me those doors. Show me where in real life I am, besides a few circumstances like voting or something, where I'm given two choices and they both suck equally.
If you don't, it presupposes that I have enough information at every single one of those infinite...
It doesn't presuppose it. I mean, god damn. It's explained what the information is. We have huge statistical data on drunk driving. I don't even, do I really need to point out the statistical data on the complete fucktarded insanity of dumping dioxin in one of the Great Lakes? How that can't possibly do anything good? Do I have to explain that to you? Do I have to explain that shitting in people's food at a restaurant would not be a good idea? I mean, fuck, this is just stupid. We're not presuming we have information. We have a ton of information about the qualitative effects a certain action is going to have on the human race. There's no doubt about it. There's no question. It's not ambiguous or confusing. This is just such a fucking pile of shit.
Number of doors in life to make a guilt-free decision. No, we never have enough information to know what the...
Oh, we never have enough information. So again, we don't have enough information to know that there's absolutely no excuse to drink and drive unless you can see somebody a mile away on fire and you're really good at putting people out who are on fire and there's nobody else around and you're the only guy that can do it and you can do it then. But yeah, you have to have some kind of excuse like that. But just for your own convenience, not a good enough excuse. Ever. Ever. Ever.
Repercussions of our actions are going to be. Butterfly effect. I might have actually...
So again, this is just, you know, again, does anybody buy this? Does anybody buy this that we can't tell right from wrong, ever? We can't know that if I just grab a knife out of my kitchen and start hacking people to death, it's not a good idea. We can't know that as an absolute 99.9999999% bad idea. Really dumb idea.
Precipitated World War III by drinking my coffee this morning. It's possible. I don't know.
And who cares? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about drinking and driving. We're talking about cutting your wife's head off. We're talking about taking drugs and driving even. We're talking about all the kinds of things we do every day. Cheating on your taxes, stealing shit from the store, cheating on your girlfriend. I mean, all these things people do routinely. There's no butterfly effect here. There's an absolute fly swatter effect. I mean, this is an absolute smackdown truth that this is not a nice thing to goddamn do.
Okay, what do? Ball up? Say, all right, well, I wish I hadn't drank that coffee because if I hadn't been so stupid and so selfish as to drink...
Nobody would have said that, right? So this is just a lie you're doing here, right? Nobody's going to say to themselves, let's say the world blows up. No, let's say a little 13-year-old girl dies because I drank coffee this morning, and somebody can document and show me the evidence that demonstrates, yep, it's your cup of coffee that did it. Now, I'm going to feel like for a minute, I'm going to say, oh, that just sucks. But I'm not going to feel guilty because I had no knowledge of it. So again, you're denying the function of guilt. You have to have knowledge of the wrong ahead of time. You can't have guilt if you have no responsibility. If you didn't have any knowledge of what the consequence would be, then you're not going to have any obligation to feel guilt. Because there is no guilt. So we're talking about things that happen because people have full knowledge of the risk. And they commit the act, the worst case scenario takes place, and they have to now accept responsibility for the fact that they really did something stupid.
Drink that coffee. The chain of events that I set into motion by drinking that coffee resulted in, let's say, not even nuclear war. Let's say it resulted in the lingering death of humanity with a disease that artificially lengthened our lives and artificially amplified our capacity to feel pain or whatever. And
and again, what rational person would sit there and say, gee, it's my fault? No, a rational person is going to say, how the fuck could I know that? Was it written somewhere? Was it in a book I didn't read? Was it on the being a human being instructions and I skipped over that page in grammar school? Is there some way I can find some reason why I'm somehow responsible to have known that? No, there is no reason. But we do know that if you you know, cheat on the test to get your, let's say, heavy equipment license. All right, so you cheated on the test, okay, Crip notes. So you really don't know what the fuck you're doing. And then you drop a fucking hunk of steel on a bunch of people in the street of New York because of your incompetence, because you really don't know what the fuck you're doing. Well, then you can be guilty. Guilty as hell.
If I hadn't drank that cup of coffee this morning, none of that would have happened. Now, do I have to take that into consideration every time that I ever do anything? The butter?
No, you don't. And again, it's like somebody, you know, I had a friend a guy committed suicide by jumping in front of her car. All right, I mean, it happens to people. But yeah, I mean, he, you know, killed himself by jumping in front of her. She was the unlucky one. Right? Yeah, she felt bad, but she didn't feel guilty. Not what the fuck. She couldn't do anything about it. All right? There was nothing she could have done. She was going as fast as all the other traffic. She was just picked to be the unlucky person that would have to deliver the blow. She didn't want to do it. She didn't take anything. She wasn't being selfish. She wasn't committing any kind of violation. She wasn't being reckless at all. Right? So what the fuck? What are you talking about? She should feel guilty. It's her fault. It's not her fault.
Butterfly effect. That's what guilt ultimately seems to imply. I don't see any way out of it.
Well, then you're not even trying. And whatever, you're just, again, you're not even talking about guilt. Guilt is always, for me anyway, always comes with a sense of responsibility and a sense of accountability. And certainly a reasonable definition of those things. So reason, responsibility, and accountability are what guilt's made out of. If you're having any other kind of guilt, if you're having guilt without reason, responsibility, and accountability, then you're not having guilt. You're having some other kind of silly emotion.
Because again, if you're going to find somebody guilty, and again, that's the guilt thing.
We find people guilty for not doing what they know not to do. Right? I mean, we don't expect axe murderers to know much, but we expect them to know, as human beings raised in human civilization, right? I mean, if they said, look, I was raised by lions, they might be able to get away with it. But they can't say that. So they can't argue that they had no clue that the human society might find it really, really abhorrent that you decide to go axe murder. So there's every expectation that you knew better, and you just couldn't give a shit because you're a selfish prick. And so, yeah, you're guilty.
It seems to be a never-ending search for scapegoats as well, for bad people.
So again, scapegoat. So he says when we put Bundy in jail and execute him, that's a scapegoat. Right? Sorry, no sale.
That's why you have CNN and things like that. Is essentially what they're doing is they just flash the photograph of the bad guy.
Yeah, you might have been better off saying Fox News, right? So you're sort of revealing your motives here. Yeah, I think you are Randian.
On the screen, and they say, there, we caught another one, another bad guy, another thought criminal, or whatever kind of heretic or scapegoat or whatever. Another bad person has been plucked out, and that...
Right, so when they show, let's say, the pictures of those two lunatics in Boston who, you know, blew a few people's legs off and shit, they're just scapegoats. They were perfectly wonderful human beings. I mean, the fact that they blew innocent people's legs off, well, gee, why are you holding that against them? Who thought that was the wrong thing to do? Who could have possibly known that it would be a terrible invasion of somebody's right to their life to blow their legs off? I've said it before, but you should get what you deserve, fucker.
Proves that the rest of us are good. Now, I think that deep down we understand the stupidity of this, because we're sort of saying, on the one hand, anybody who actually does something bad can get a let by setting themselves up as victims. So,
like I said, it really doesn't happen. It happens so infrequently. I mean, absolute lunatics aren't declared insane. Jeffrey Dahmer went to prison. He didn't go to an insane asylum. He went to prison. I mean, you can't get much crazier.
We've now got a situation in which potentially we're all victims and potentially we're all perpetrators. That is kind of an infinite regression that I think are...
Well, I think it's just absolute nonsense. I don't even know what you're talking about. I have no fucking clue how to make any sense out of that whatsoever. Nope. I don't know. Somebody else, any kind of clue what the hell that means? We're all victims and we're all perpetrators. We're all in the same category. We all are exactly the same kind of person. The Bundy is the same thing as the nurse at the hospital.
Society is grappling with right now. The situation that gets set up when you put guilt into your ethics. Can you imagine if we took guilt out of our ethics?
Yeah, again, so remember, guilt is reason, responsibility, and ultimately taking accountability, being accountable for your impact on the world. Not having accountability imposed on you. You being self-accounting. You accepting accountability. Isn't that what guilt is? Is guilt something else? Does it come from some other source? Rational guilt, reasonable guilt, meaningful guilt? Isn't the rest of it just self-persecution? If you have guilt without reason, responsibility, and accountability, you just have some sort of complex there where you want to whip yourself or something just to show everybody how whippable you are.
Tomorrow, what would happen? Watch Judge Judy. It's all guilt in action. Watch a political speech. It's all guilt in action.
Yeah, well, I don't think those things are demonstrations of the best of, human ethics in motion. So, right, lying politicians and a stupid entertainment show where they've dramatized justice.
Action. Anybody who is a leader for anything, it's all based on guilt and the presupposition that it's possible to identify victim from perp.
That it's possible to identify victim from perp. So really, I mean, can I just show of hands? Is there some way? I don't know what to say. Does anybody understand that? I mean, do people actually believe that the victims, the 13-year-old girl, whatever her name was in California, and that guy who raped and killed her, that those two people were in the same category? That I couldn't tell them apart on any kind of level? He breaks into her bedroom at night, kidnaps her, tortures her, rapes her, murders her. And she was like just, whatever, playing with dolls or something. But these two things are the same thing. These two individual human beings are the same. We can't distinguish between the two of them. Sorry, no sale.
And that victims are people who shouldn't be judged to the same standard as perps. Guilt-based ethics are...
Well, clearly there are people who are driven to it. And acknowledging that would probably be okay, right? I mean, some people are driven to it. I mean, there was that woman who, cut her husband's penis off, because he raped her and did all this other shit, And so I'm not saying she should have got it off, but it is an excuse. I mean, you drive somebody insane, they'll behave insanely, and you really can't complain then, can you?
Sort of completely crazy, but I would say a guilt-based justice system is almost just as crazy.
Well, whatever. So he doesn't think our justice system is reason-based, that we attempt to put people who are dangerous and have contempt for civilization in jail, and we attempt to not put people who are good citizens and productive not in jail. He doesn't think we're trying to do that. Okay, I think he's an idiot.
Again, I'm not saying that we take that out of the system. I'm merely pointing out that we have to see that for what it is, and we have to understand what the pratfalls of it are. If we push it to its logical conclusion. Ultimately, we're all perpetrators, and we are all victims.
Okay, well, whatever. Like I said, I don't see any way to justify that. There are responsible people, there are irresponsible people, there are selfish people, there are productive people. It's just absolute, to not recognize these different categories as existing and people clearly falling into these different categories is just absolutely a denial of reality.
In that case, we either all go to jail or we all get out.
There you go.
That's why I say that Gary's situation, his formula, has essentially abolished guilt.
Again, yes, emotional guilt is useless. I think it's perfectly reasonable to reasonably acknowledge failure and to do something about it.
We're all guilty of everything. I drank my...
Well, I'm sorry, we're not all guilty of everything. It's just a silly thing to say. It's absolutely silly.
A cup of coffee this morning, didn't I? I should have thought it through.
So, big difference between being a CEO of a corporation and saying, well, look, I want to make another $100,000 this year, so let's find some way to cut costs. So can't you pour some of that chemical that the FDA says we can't use? Well, can't you add an ion to it or something so it's not the same chemical, but it really is the same chemical, and put it in the shit? So, you know, fuck people. We kill a few people, so what? I want to make $100,000 more this year. And we, you know, whatever. Like I said, there's no point in talking to somebody who can't understand the difference between somebody who acts maliciously, sadistically, without any thought to environmental consequences on the future, the present and the future, without any willingness to contemplate the possibility of doing something destructive to others, and people who do think about that. They're not in the same category. Asshole and not asshole. Yeah, two different categories. You know, the not assholes might not be brilliant, but they're not assholes.